Hello YouTube, this is Morgan Airspeed Prime here with my next Boruto 2 Blue Vortex manga chapter review. This one's going to be for chapter 15, which is called A Vibrant Life. So, overall, I thought this was a pretty good chapter. I wouldn't say I was blown away by it, but it was definitely a chapter that moved things along. So we got a lot of context behind what exactly happened with Gaara and Shinki. We did get the kind of debut of Ryu, but we also interestingly got some Code stuff. Code kind of coming back into the story and being given a bit of a purpose, which is definitely interesting. There's a lot of moving parts going on in the series right now for sure. More on the Kankuro Shikamaru discussion that has like at least one kind of interesting element to it. And then of course from the preview we knew that Kawaki and Boruto were going to talk, and even that has a bit of an interesting kind of angle to it in that finally they've committed to what I think been obvious for quite a while now in the series. We have to put sort of grudges aside for now to deal with these Divine Tree enemy characters. Then we can address Boruto, Kawaki's hatred of Otsutsuki's, the fact that like Momoshiki finally gets brought up here, which by itself is like finally. So they did a lot. It's just maybe not the most like reveal kind of event heavy chapter style thing, but it's very, very good still. So let's go through it in some detail. On the cover page we get Ryu here, so makes sense. He has his kind of makes sense because this is effectively his proper debut chapter after like 2 chapters of kind of like teasing. Makes a lot of sense, but we'll jump in here. So when we start off, we actually get a bit of a flashback to what exactly happened with Gaara, Shinki, and actually the other 2 members of Shinki's team, the kind of Sand Shinobis. So where this seems to be set, interestingly, as Matsuri kind of points out, is that she's only here on the trail of Boruto and his accomplices. The fact that she seems to have run into Gaara and some Sand Shinobi is a kind of complete accident of circumstances, basically. She seems to have been tracking Kashin Koji because the location is the same location where, in at least the flashback, Kashin Koji first kind of encountered Boruto and explained his powers to him. So, at least at a certain point, maybe it still is the case, maybe Kashin Koji just escaped this situation. This used to be his base of operations, but probably isn't anymore. Why is Gaara out here, I suppose is an interesting one, but you know, just cool stuff there. So what's happened here is that Gaara has encased the younger shinobi, including his son, in these kind of sand balls. And Shinki is like, please undo your sand, father. Let us fight with you. But Gaara is going to make the sacrifice here to allow the younger shinobis to get out, and he'll go down. Shinki, of course, as we'll see, ends up reversing this because for Matsuri, none of these characters particularly matter to her. She points out that Gaara has effectively suffered somewhat of a life-threatening wound. He is going to die if not like treated, basically. As in, why aren't you more concerned about yourself? But of course he is concerned about the youth, and that's the kind of situation then. And she just says like, oh, if you're not going to resist, I'm okay with letting them go. And he kind of pushes them away, saying that like, you know, the future of the Sand Village is in your hands. This is when Shinki actually escapes, at least gets his hand free out of the sand ball and uses his, of course, magnetic sand. So he's got that Kekkei Genkai, and he uses that to break free of the ball completely, and then actually encases Gaara completely in, it's what, magnetic particle barrier palm. So it's a whole barrier surrounding Gaara, but he very quickly then gets bitten by one of the claw grimes, and this is how he is turned into a tree. With Shinki saying that, father, you are still needed for the Sand Village's future. So the others are able to kind of get away, but Gaara is, as we get the details here, he is just kind of imprisoned in Shinki's sealing jutsu here. They can't break free of it because he was turned into a tree while doing this. And because you're still alive in the tree, his sealing jutsu still persists, so they can't break that down right now. We'll get the solution to how Gaara is going to get out shortly, but of course, we still have a little bit of a ticking clock situation here, because Gaara apparently is mortally wounded, so he's going to die if, you know, in a short amount of time. So someone needs to get him out to, you know, allow him to recover, of course, because I don't think we're going to kill off Gaara at least anytime soon right now. He has to, I think, play a bigger role in this. There's a reason I think we've introduced a kind of sand-focused Divine Tree character, is to allow a lot of these characters to have a fight at some point in the future. So, yeah, that's the details there. And she just notes when she reflects back on, you know, Shinki is now a tree. Oh, he might make an interesting teammate. So that's interesting, because obviously from the previous chapters we've got the idea she seems to be the one who is able to, or at least engineers a lot of the kind of creation, the birth of the new kind of Divine Tree characters. So she seems to have a real kind of insight into that side of things. But we come out of that initial scene and we go back to Kankuro over the call, of course, explaining things to Shikamaru, that yeah, Gaara has also escaped death, but the sealing jutsu, you know, means that we can't free him because only Shinki can undo the barrier. So we want to get Shinki free first, then free Gaara, but, you know, what's the timeline on that, of course? So Shikamaru then asks, because of course he has information on this, has anyone with the same chakra signature as Shinki been spotted? And they say no. So they don't know about Ryu yet, because he's only just been sort of debuted to us effectively, so of course none of the other characters really know about it. Boruto and Kashin Koji, I guess, sort of do, but you know, that's a completely different situation, of course. So Shikamaru is going to come up with some plans, and then we sort of end this with Kankuro saying, could you keep this information about what has happened at the Sand Village and to Gaara from Tamari for now? Don't want her to get worried, and Shikamaru agrees to this. Now, they say this obviously for a reason. I'm guessing Tamari will eventually get involved when she hears word of this, and we know what she's kind of like, so the idea is she's probably going to want to go get going if she hears about it, so we'll see how that it ends up kind of playing out. Again, it's another thing, it's another little bit of a secret that Shikamaru is having to keep here, because he's been quite heavily involved in the story up to now as well. And that's an interesting one to keep track of also. Sarada points out that, oh, well, does this mean that there's going to be even more Divine Tree characters? Yes, and he just tells Sumire and Sarada, like, hey, if Boruto contacts you, let me know. I want his intel. So he's kind of on their side now, and that is good. And this is where we see that one of Kashin Koji's toads is, in fact, kind of watching this, basically, which is interesting. From there, we cut to the kind of introduction of Ryu here. So he is named, of course. Jura says, yeah, I came up with it. It's the key piece of information required for you to establish your identity. And he ends up quite liking it. Interestingly, he also refers to all of the other Divine Tree characters as elders. So he's quite respectful, and kind of Matsuri, I think, is a bit taken aback by how polite he is. But then he immediately is like, wait, shh, and uses Shinki's magnetic sand jutsu, and basically grabs code out of the cube thing that Ryu is standing on. Code's eye is pointing out, and he pulls Code out of this, revealing that Code was sort of spying on them this entire time. Jura says, okay, release him. We owe our existence to him. And it's like, oh, cool. What is this dynamic? You know, getting back into this. What's the situation here? They're obviously not subservient to him, but how do they really treat him? And so there's a certain respect given to him because they're only like this because of Code, but like most characters, and I suppose most fans to a certain degree, it's like Code just keeps taking loss after loss after loss. Apart from being a bit of a nuisance, like he's strong enough to cause problems. That seems to be the positioning of Code up to now, and that basically seems to be what we're kind of doing with him here. The question that really comes up here is, you know, they want to use him. He just wants to reiterate that when it comes to chakra fruit, so you guys like achieving your goal of like devouring the people that you're after, if you devour Boruto or Kawaki and a divine tree properly happens, and a chakra fruit comes out of that, that chakra fruit is mine, because again, my goal is to become an Otsutsuki and inherit Ishiki's will. Jura recaps this, which is quite interesting. A mass of highly dense energy and the genetic information of all life on the planet. I wonder what would happen if we divine trees ate it, which is a super interesting question because, of course, this is the Otsutsuki's path to power. And then there's the interesting dynamic where apparently it is true that if Code eats it, he will become an Otsutsuki. So somehow, through this whole system, Ten-Tails allow you to sort of become an Otsutsuki. Now, there's definitely some origin story, deeper lore, history about how did the Otsutsukis come across the Ten-Tails to know that they could do this to kind of increase their powers, and a little bit of a sense of like, wait, are we basically talking about the same thing here? Like, are these intelligent divine tree characters, is this in essence them showing us like how the Otsutsukis came to be, and that the original life form is effectively a Ten-Tails, and Otsutsukis are just effectively evolved Ten-Tails, and that's kind of what we're seeing here, just in an unusual way. What is the exact connection here? Because obviously from different like planets, effectively, dimensions, whatever way you want to call it. But are the Otsutsukis originally like another species that was on the same planet where there were also Ten-Tails? There's definitely some lore that they have to go into here, because this is such an interesting question of like them effectively being like, well, what if we ate a fruit that we like basically generated ourselves? Because up to now, the Ten-Tails have just been used to sort of facilitate other stuff happening. But now the whole idea here is that this is them taking on an individuality, effectively. So very, very intriguing to know what the idea here is. Obviously, I'm guessing they'd get more powerful, because the idea is, even though they're living, if any of them ate an Otsutsuki, they, I guess, would become some sort of a tree-like thing, and they would grow the fruit. And I'm guessing the implication is probably that one of the other ones would eat the fruit from the tree that is one of the other ones. So I don't know, we might avoid the situation of like, what if they ate their own one, and then would they even be in a form where they would be able to do that? Interesting situation, because again, they're all fundamentally from the same Ten-Tails, with Jura being the unique aspect here of him being like the original kind of, he maybe is the actual core identity of this specific Ten-Tails, but we have to wait and see what happens, of course. So Code is like, well, you're trying to defy me, so he goes to attack. And then Jura just shows how powerful he is. Now, there is an interesting thing here where, because Code has the claw mark, the kind of divine jutsu, he is able to use their clothing, which is made of claw marks, for himself. They don't have like direct control over that, even though it's, I suppose, part of their bodies. Code still is able to do that, but they are just raw more powerful than Code is, which is, I think, a quite interesting dynamic where he is the holder of that core power, but they're more powerful than him. And yeah, he tries to put his arm out of Jura to kill Jura, but Jura just, you know, uses his kind of sniper kind of Rinnegan blast thing, the kind of mini tail beast bomb thing, to blow Code's arm off, and he actually just full on gets it here. It seems like it's a full on devastating blow here. Code loses an arm, and I don't know if we're necessarily going to see him recover from this, because of course he still has the eye injury from the kind of Boruto Sasuke situation, so he doesn't seem to have just like that level of regeneration or anything like that going on. But he does say Jura to Code, like, okay, this fight's over effectively. I'm grateful that you bestowed upon us the ability to think freely. But I think your life actually lacks a wee bit of motivation. So out of respect to you, our benefactor, I shall assign you a task. And basically, Jura assigns Code to go after Boruto and his accomplices and kill them. Because they only need Kawaki, who they view as being the easier option to capture and consume. And apparently in exchange for this, Jura is just going to be like, yeah, and I'll give you the chakra fruit. Does that not inject some color into your faded life? And Code ends up agreeing to this. He uses claw marks to sort of seal his wound, but I guess he is just missing an arm from this point on, which is interesting. The others all mock him, so Code takes L after L after L in this series. And yeah, he says he is going to go after Boruto and his comrades. He is like, I demand to be given the chakra fruit when I succeed. But Jura's just like, good luck, I'm pulling for you. I look forward to seeing where your destiny leads. Code does say, like, I will be the one who has the last laugh, but they don't seem to care. And then the second he leaves, Ryu is like, can I kill him the next time he shows up? And Jura says yeah. So he's immediately willing to go against this deal. I guess just purely manipulating Code here. I'm guessing he was never actually planning to give him the chakra fruit overall, because again, he did ask the notable question, I wonder what would happen if one of us ate that chakra fruit, and I think he wants to see that come to fruition. He's just doing something to give Code a bit of direction when he doesn't really have it, which is quite interesting. So then we turn our attentions back to Ryu, and Jura immediately wants to be like, okay, now the next thing, you have your name, think about it, turn inwards, what is your instinct telling you, who is your target? And he's like, oh yeah, I already know, that's a given. A special jutsu might have sealed him away, but since I'm able to release said jutsu, who's your choice? The 5th Kazekage, Gaara of the Sand, of course. So that was, I think, completely expected. There was no other way I think they could obviously make the connection here. And I think with the way they positioned Gaara, I think this makes a lot of sense. That with the way the whole tree situation works, he has his jutsu and I guess his chakra signature, so he can also, undo that seal. So that, I guess, is how Gaara is going to be freed. But so to avoid Gaara just being consumed, we are going to have to get to action and go to the hideout underground to sort of protect Gaara when he is freed, so that he's basically freed. Hero characters get in there, get Gaara out to prepare him, I guess, for a fight in the future, because at least that's the way I'm thinking it, is that we will have Gaara face off against Ryu, likely with the support of other characters. So I'm guessing, Tamari probably might get involved there, maybe Shikamaru. Certainly Shinki's teammates, I guess, will be involved on that side of things, depending on what way the story specifically goes. But that, to me, seems like the very obvious idea here with this reveal. Then we go into the final section of the chapter, and that is just a pretty long conversation here between Boruto and Kawaki. So Boruto is waiting on top of Naruto's head of the monuments, of course. Kawaki then appears, and we just get the idea, are you alone? Yes, though Ada's probably watching. Boruto then asks, why haven't you attacked? Kawaki counters with, well, why haven't you told the village the truth? And Boruto, as we suspected, feels nothing good would come of it. If I was to try and turn the village against you, it would cause more division and confusion when we need everyone together. That is effectively what Boruto is trying to say here, that he is fine accepting that he is a rogue ninja for now, because he is focused on the goal at hand. We need to defeat these villains who are threatening the planet. That is a greater threat than the conflict that the two of us have. Sure, Otsutsuki's, yes, if more of them come, that's a major threat as well. Sure, if Momoshiki takes over my body, that is a threat, but we can manage that, whereas we have to work everyone together to actually face off against now 5 Divine Tree characters, plus Code is involved in that as well, of course. So that's the situation there. And he also points out, I have unwavering strength thanks to my teacher. Then we finally get it. 15 chapters into Two Blue Vortex, finally Momoshiki gets addressed. Kawaki asks about him straight up. Things ain't settled with him, are they? From what I saw earlier, you still can't control your karma. Boruto then reveals that 2 years ago, when Sasuke and Code fought, when my teacher and I fought Code together, who are they referring to here? Unwavering strength thanks to my teacher, so that has to be Kashin Koji there. But then, who fought Code? Like it was still Sasuke, wasn't it? That was that incident, yeah. Either way, the idea is when this incident happened, this is when Boruto used his karma for the first time since he left the village, and he sensed it, something similar to the feeling I got whenever Momoshiki possessed me. A feeling where I stopped being who I am and started dying while still conscious and aware. Since then, I haven't used karma once. Why did this happen? He doesn't know. Because Momoshiki has been completely quiet these past 3 years, but it's possible that activating karma will cause him to emerge. And Kawaki feels that this means the situation inside Boruto is even worse, that Momoshiki is now a bit of an unknown threat for the last couple of years. Boruto changes subject and is like, you do know, and you probably sensed it already because you lost to them, the Divine Tree people are no ordinary enemies, especially Jura. I can't take him down by myself. I need your help. Kawaki is like, we're not done discussing Momoshiki. And he just says, all I'm saying is that the Divine Trees come first. Once they're gone, if I happen to lose it and run amok, go ahead and kill me. So Boruto has very much taken up the approach of effectively like, the greater good here. Like the mission comes first. And in his mind, that order is Divine Tree characters first to save the planet from being destroyed. And then we address the mystery that is Momoshiki within inside me. You go ahead and deal with that at that point. But he points out that either way, if you're coming after the Divine Tree characters with me, or you're coming after me directly, you're going to need to get a lot stronger because I'm more powerful than you. And this is the preview page. So official translation is, you're my dad's student. Normally, the ideal thing would be for you to free him and have him train you directly, but it's not a realistic option because it would take too long. Then what he says is that, okay, what I'm about to tell you, you would have reached this conclusion eventually. So I'll get you straight to the point here. What are you saying? Get Amado to talk. He's been hiding your power from you. So this is very interesting. We know that Amado, of course, is the reason the likes of Kawaki and all of other characters have their powers. And he's done stuff to kind of affect that as the series has kind of gone on. And he says that in addition to putting limiters on your offensive abilities, he's adjusted your defensive and regenerative abilities to above maximum levels. What? And we see that Amado is actually watching this, which is quite interesting. And yeah, he's watching it through Kawaki's eyes. So that's interesting. And he's like, how did Boruto find out? This is where he realizes that, oh, Kashin Koji must be alive. I don't know what his goal is in everything, what's his motive, but that must be the only way to explain it. What can he do at this point? That sort of idea. Boruto just points out, Amado needs your karma for his own self-serving purposes. He messed with your abilities to try and prevent your death. I bet he thought Code would attack you. If you think I'm lying, ask Amado. And Boruto goes to leave at this point. So, again, this is the Akebi situation. And the idea that he needs Kawaki to make that happen. Kawaki and his specific, karma and the way kind of it works, apparently would be able to facilitate somehow bringing Akebi back to life. Obviously, Boruto doesn't quite address that, but obviously this is a huge part of Amado's motivation as a character. The reason he's doing a lot of stuff is just to, as we see here, lean Kawaki's powers to being quite defensive, healing based, not super offensive based. But the idea, I guess, is that now Kawaki's going to confront Amado, get him to undo the Unlimiters, and this should immediately get Kawaki up to the required level to where Kawaki and Boruto can be the double threat against the Divine Tree characters that is required, with the idea seemingly being that 2-on-1, the two of them should be able to, especially if they work together, defeat Jura, which is a very interesting prospect. So, Kawaki says, I ain't changing my opinion. Those Divine Tree people, it's the Otsutsuki's fault for bringing the 10 Tails. They're evil and need to be exterminated. Every single one of them has to be eliminated, including you and me. So, like, he's sticking to his guns on this. It's just he's devoting his life to getting rid of the Otsutsukis, and he feels that that's the only thing that needs to happen. And you can sort of see within both characters, they have got to this kind of approach of, like, to a certain degree, they've decided that at a certain point in time, once a few things are accomplished, they are kind of willing to give up their lives or kind of throw it away in some way, where if Boruto feels that to kind of get to a better solution, he has to allow Kawaki to take him out. He's willing to do that, and Kawaki is willing to kind of die after taking out the other Ototsukis. Now, at least to me, I'm kind of like, the unspoken thing whenever Kawaki mentions that is, we don't know how many Ototsukis there are out there. As far as we're aware, there is an entire clan of them out there that has like a structure that includes like branch families and a main family, and that there are higher ups. There's like a potential leader of the Ototsukis overall, and we have not introduced most of these characters, and it feels like we're a super long way from that happening. Whereas they seem to be treating it as, to a certain degree, Kawaki, I think, is thinking about this as if the only Otsutsukis are himself and Boruto, and now he accepts that the Ten Tails stuff relates to them, and so he's willing to deal with that as well. But I think there's a lot of lore stuff that they're not really thinking about right now or addressing, that I'm wondering, like, does Kashin Koji maybe know about some of this stuff, or are they just not tackling that right now? Because again, the whole God Otsutsuki thing, like, feels like that has to come up again at some point and address what the situation is. Is there another Otsutsuki that's maybe close to achieving that level? Because we assume other Otsutsukis are on other planets doing this and potentially succeeding. This is just the story happening when it comes to the ones that we know about, like Kaguya and Ishiki and stuff like that. So, got to think about the greater lore in this as well, which is interesting. So yeah, the last 2 pages, and so Kawaki says, I will accomplish my goal of getting rid of all the Otsutsuki's by any means necessary, even partnering with you. And so Boruto laughs and says, you better not weigh me down, bro. And Kawaki says, back at you, jerk. So obviously it is a team up here of necessity. There's still a lot of unresolved issues between the two of them. Boruto has accepted his position as a rogue shinobi because he has a sense that this needs to happen before we get to a situation where it can deal with you, and he can attempt to maybe get Kawaki onto the right path. Kawaki is just so focused on his goals where he's like, well, I guess you will help me get rid of some of the Otsutsuki related stuff, and then we'll deal with that afterwards. Like that is the setup here. It feels sort of like, to a certain degree, the end of like Naruto Shippuden, where it's like, okay, here's Kaguya, but then after Kaguya, it's Naruto Sasuke is the setup, and they're doing that again. But in this case, like I said, the unspoken thing of like, Kawaki, have you thought it through? What exactly the whole getting rid of all the Ototsukis actually means? Like, is he okay with just there being other Ototsukis out there so long as they don't target the planet? Because theoretically, it's this idea where like he feels he's taken them all out. He himself dies. Then someone else comes. it does feel like the series is eventually maybe going to want to try and stop them for good. And like I said, there is some other lore being addressed with that when it comes to like Jura asking the question, what would happen to me, like effectively, if I ate a chakra fruit? Something that I can produce myself. If I ate it myself, what does that do for me? As far as we're aware, it has the ability to effectively turn someone into an Otsutsuki. The only other power that we know it to particularly have is that it evolves people who are already Otsutsukis. It gives them more power and evolves them quite literally. So, interesting stuff here. This now means, I guess, Boruto is allied with Kawaki in the village, so because Shikamaru is also on the right side, it's an interesting one because it doesn't mean that I guess Boruto is going to get to hang out in the village, but I guess he has enough people backing him where he probably can just teleport in and out of the village when required. So he's maybe never going to be super comfortable doing that, but at least he's allied with enough people in the village where there's like Sarada, Sumire, Shikamaru, Kawaki. And maybe other people can be convinced. Like Ada, of course, I'm guessing is going to follow suit. She knows about it. Demon, similarly. So a lot of the main characters are going to be okay with Boruto, and in a way, because of that, I guess it gives him a certain amount of freedom. It's just about what exactly happens next. I'm assuming next chapter immediately probably has to deal with Kawaki going to Amado, and maybe some of that interesting Amado character stuff is going to come out. I'm guessing we will see Kawaki's power boost happen immediately, because they definitely switched it from a lot of the early speculation when we just had the preview page, I think was more, oh, is Boruto going to train Kawaki? But it seems to be more of like, no, he'll just get the power boost. But again, the unanswered thing in all of this is that it does mean the two of them can't really fight with each other. Because even if Kawaki succeeds with Amado and gets his limiters unblocked, he still primarily utilizes, like, okay, the scientific kind of ninja tool aspect of his body, but also karma. And apparently, if he uses karma, that activates Boruto's karma, and that causes Momoshiki to come out. So it's a weird situation where the two of them can't really partner up when it comes to fighting directly, unless we deal with something with Boruto when it comes to him actually being able to defend against that kind of karma resonance, I think is what they referred to it as previously. Unless they are going to just address that basically neither of us can really use karma going into this because you'll cause me to go haywire, so this is just a net boost to kind of Kawaki's other skills, or Boruto is actually going to train him as well as getting the unlimiter kind of removed, but still interesting. Next chapter is going to be a volume ending, chapter 16, so it's divisible by 4, so that would usually lead us to assume that something big is potentially going to happen. In terms of what the Divine Tree characters are setting up, obviously Code, I guess, is going to maybe want to immediately come after Boruto and Ko, but he obviously isn't going to succeed, but he's just powerful enough to kind of be messy. It does feel like he's being completely used and manipulated at this point, and so I'm wondering, are we going to be able to turn Code? That, to a certain degree, Jura is just like, oh, I'm so powerful, I'll just manipulate Code. And he maybe doesn't think about the idea that, like, well, Code could be quite valuable if he was on the other character's side of things. But then, because Code is directly after the chakra fruit, that's a bit of an interesting thing. But that also involves the planet basically being destroyed to get that chakra fruit for him to become an Otsutsuki. So it feels like it was never something that was ever going to happen. Unless they try and do some really awkward thing where it's like a half chakra fruit and it kind of works and something like that. Otherwise, Ryu, I guess, is going to probably want to immediately go after Gaara because we know the situation there, where apparently Gaara is just in a ball in that underground cave, and he can just go there, free him, and consume him. Because we don't know what happens when one of these characters consumes their target. And the problem with that is that I think everyone who has been a target so far, I don't think is going to get consumed. Because I think that's just... None of the characters feel like disposable enough to do that with. Where it's like, for Jura, it's Naruto, maybe it's actually switched and it is actually Himawari. We don't really know what the situation is there. It's Ada for the bug guy. It's Konohamaru for Matsuri, if I remember correctly. Yes. It's Sarada for Hidari, so that's definitely not going to happen. And I don't think they're going to have Ryu, consume Gaara either. So it's an interesting one where, like, it's a concept that we're probably never going to see reach fruition unless another character gets introduced and their target is a disposable character. So it'll be interesting to see how that all plays out, especially because, okay, Shikamaru's going to want to do something. They're discussing things. There's going to be some action in or around the Sand Village, and again, Gaara, when he gets out, I'm guessing is going to be rescued to set him up to recover and be involved in a fight at a later point to do this. The other point, I guess, is just that, like, I guess we're just not going to free Naruto at this point in time, but I don't think that was probably ever really on the table until the threat is really dealt with at the same time. So, lots of stuff going on. Like, that's the thing with Boruto. Sometimes the chapters are maybe not the most satisfying just because we want to see what's going on with this character. We want to see big progress made every chapter. And they oftentimes can't do that and maybe don't use the page count super well. But at its core, what's actually going on in this series is actually quite complicated. There's a lot of moving parts, and it's actually very interesting where they could go and what could happen at any point in time, because it is actually a series that's kind of hard to exactly predict what happens. There's always some sort of a surprise. Like a few chapters ago, did we really expect a fifth Divine Tree character to be introduced? And then once that happened, did we really expect them to really suddenly shift and now Boruto and Kawaki are working together kind of out of nowhere, whereas we maybe expected that to happen a bunch of chapters ago? It's interesting. So, yeah, in the comments, let me know what your thoughts are on Chapter 15 of 2 Blue Vortex, but that's been the video. Thanks for watching, and bye.